Just indignation. Righteous indignation.
Hello and welcome to this extra special episode of The Dig, the podcast about the politics of race, class, sexuality, and other things that matter. I'm Corey.
I'm Alexis.
And we're righteously indignant.
I have not ever been this indignant or upset or concerned about anything. I don't even know what to do with myself. So we were not planning on meeting today. We weren't going to record today. And we were both like, there's so much going on right now. We can't air the episode that we had in the can. That's like, jokey, here's a survey. When our neighborhood where we just moved from is absolutely torn up, emotionally devastated, and I have to talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
And then we'll talk about other things too. But
we only have one other thing to talk about, really. So.
Yeah, but we always manage to find some other things.
That's true.
Okay. So this thing that's got me beside myself is the death of Freddie Gray as a result of what happened between the moment he was taken into custody in Baltimore on the 1700 block of Presbury, which is a 5-minute walk from where I worked for a decade and where I lived and where all these children I care about are, who could easily be a Freddie Gray. We don't know why they pursued him. The police's version thus far is that it was suspicious that he was running. But he's been in and out of jail on, I think, small possession charges, which I don't even want to get into it because it's so irrelevant. And then we're going to go down the criminalization of pot and how racist that is. And I'm just going to focus on the fact that he didn't want to be near these police officers, and so he did run. So they arrested him, they handcuffed him, and then through a series of events, including several stops of the paddy wagon, he was put in leg shackles. Eyewitnesses have the police tossing him back in the paddy wagon with his legs and hands shackled, tossed head first and face down, and not restrained in any way. No seatbelt, nothing. And then jostled around in this paddy wagon for another half hour. And at some point asked for medical attention and didn't receive it, so was still speaking. Goes to shock trauma, is in a coma, has a major surgery, and a week later dies. So all of the injuries happened after he was picked up by the police and before he got medical care. And the cause of death is that his spinal cord was broken. It was severed, 80% severed, and several vertebrae were broken, and a couple other injuries, but all of it occurred in that time frame. In addition to what I've seen on the news and heard on the news, I have a lot of students and friends in this community, and I didn't know that I could reveal this, but then I saw it on the news today, or in an article today. So I can also share that he was small and fragile and sick, and that he suffered a pretty severe case of lead paint poisoning as a child. So he was kind of known by his friends to be delayed, to be a little bit slower intellectually, and that he was fragile and small, very small. And the kind of community policing that needs to happen in a community like Sandtown would involve cops who know that about a kid that they've interacted with 15, 20 times. It keeps being low-level stuff, keeps not, being any sort of danger to his community. Could absolutely be reintegrated, but how they don't know their own community that they police so aggressively is maddening to me. It's infuriating. And then to add so much insult to injury, this community they're all reeling, and they are dealing with it in every possible way. There are people crying. There are people shutting themselves in their homes in fear. There are people peacefully protesting. There are people coming from out of town to come show solidarity. There are teenagers who are angry and want answers and are teenagers and don't know how to handle themselves when they have all of this flood of emotions. There is some violence. It is the small minority of what is going on. And all of that is being lumped together and portrayed by the national media as riots and violent uprisings by these angry people, and how that is not the solution and that won't fix anything. And I want to know, what is the fucking solution? Because we've tried everything else. What is the solution? Okay? And two, when are black people allowed to be mad? If it's not when their children are being gunned down systematically by the people who are supposed to protect them, or thrown into a paddy wagon head first, if that's not when black people are allowed to be mad, let me know when they are. Because they weren't allowed to be mad during civil rights. They weren't even allowed to be mad when they were trying to flee slavery. They've been called uppity and difficult and savage for centuries, no matter what it is they're opposed to. Were they supposed to go along with those things as well? If they sat at home right now and acted like this was okay, wouldn't they be complicit? Wouldn't you say they were bad parents? Wouldn't you say they were heartless? What are they supposed to do right now? What are the black communities of America supposed to do? It is child after child and unarmed person after unarmed person. It is Rakia Boyd, who's the killer just got off. The cop got off completely, and they couldn't even get 100 people together to march in the streets. It's so many, and they are told again and again, it's just this once. It was just this one bad cop, or it wasn't even a bad cop. It was a good cop, but he grabbed for the taser, or she, Ayanna Stanley Jones's grandmother supposedly reached through a smoke bomb to grab an assault rifle while holding her grandbaby, because that's what grandmas do. There's always an excuse. When do they get angry? How should they be behaving? White America, who thinks it's not enough to take away their children, now you have to tell them how to behave after? I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say, and I have friends in Baltimore who mean really well, talking about this isn't the answer. It's a lot of white people telling black people that what they're doing isn't the answer. And if you have the answer, savior white person, go ahead and say it. We'll be waiting while children die, because it's literally that bad out there. And I love this community, Sandtown. I was told an old yarn, an old tale about why Sandtown is called Sandtown, and I think it's probably true, because I was told it by an older minister, and then completely separately by one of my students' grandmothers. And they say that Sandtown was it was always the place en route to where they would go do construction. So they would be building up all the other parts of Baltimore, and the trucks would leave behind what looked like sand on the roads from building up everywhere else. And then it got its nickname Sandtown. There was an old theater called the Royal. Billie Holiday, when she lived there, didn't live too far away. There's a memorial to her in Sandtown. There used to be a really thriving, gorgeous black community and culture that was in response to a very segregated city. And it was a place of joy and of art for a very long time. And then it was ravaged by the drug epidemics of crack and heroin, and has since been brought back in many, many ways, largely to the credit of Habitat for Humanity. Has had a huge role in this community. I've talked about it before. It's a place that is so hopeful and has so much promise and has so many beautiful children right now who are suddenly forced to become activists. My students, who I've known since first grade, are kind of thrown into this world of like, wait a second, my life is at risk too. This isn't just a thing on the news. Like, Black Lives Matter means me, you know, and they're in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. And then they're being told, sometimes from within their community, you know, yes, this one incident happened, but where your focus needs to be is on the violence already within your community, within our community, and all of the black on black crime. And not only is that wrong-headed and false, and so sad that a lot of brown people are saying it, but it's also a really insensitive time to be saying it. Because this kid has just died. I say kid, I think he was 24. Weighed 145 pounds. Real small guy. He was running. So this kid has just died, and his family is mourning him in this community. So you don't really need to talk about what they should be focused on. But if it were a better time, it would still be a false narrative to say that what people should be worried about is the other crime that is supposedly black on black crime. But if they were really concerned about life and about violence and about crime, then they wouldn't need to say the words black on black. Because all racial groups have more violence within their group. There is no higher likelihood of black people to kill black people than white people to kill white people, or Hispanics to kill Hispanics. There's literally no data to show that. And to say black on black implies that there is, and it does that visibility of blackness again, because no one has ever said white on white crime. No one has ever. Can you imagine if, like, the Aurora shooting happens and a white person kills a group of largely white people, and you go, yeah, that happened, and that guy was crazy, but what you really should be talking about is all the white on white crime that happens. That guy was just a crazy person, but really there's white on white crime. I mean, it's a little bit flawed because he's not a cop, but that was the example I got in my head. But that's just it. There is no comparison. There is no example of cops killing white people, unarmed, innocent people, or people fleeing, or people who they're running, their back is to you, they never had a weapon, they've got a taser, they've been tased. There's no history of that in the reverse. So it's not comparable to talk about police killing systemically an entire people group and then talk about citizens killing one another, as happens in all races, and is unfortunate. And yes, we should try to end it. Yeah, sure. That would involve some gun safety laws. Sorry to break it to you. That would involve universal background checks. Sorry. So we're not willing to do that. We're not willing to work on on how we treat mental illness or how we take care of our vets. We don't want to face any of those problems, so let's just talk about black on black crime like it's a thing, like it's a disproportionate thing, and you have some facts to back it up. I don't know. Call me crazy. I want some evidence. It's just a false narrative, and I don't like that the kids are being sold it. That's so sad. Their peer has been taken from them, and they are parroting, yeah, but I guess what we really need to worry about is how we kill one another.
It's really like victim blaming.
Yeah.
In a way. Because it's not about how the police are doing wrong by the community. It's not about how this kid never had a chance from birth because of privilege and because of just all the horrible things that are being done systematically and institutionally against people of color. But it becomes then about, oh, well, we have the responsibility to not kill each other. And if we weren't so violent with each other, which is not true to begin with, but this is their thinking now. If we weren't so violent with each other, then things like our friends and neighbors getting killed by white police officers wouldn't happen.
Right, that's
Which
just it.
doesn't make any... It's completely separate, not the same thing.
Right, not the same thing, and it's worse. It feeds into it. It feeds into police brutality to use this language to say, to give any power to the words that black people are inherently scary, that an unarmed black person, often men in this particular conversation, are scary just by being. I don't even remember which victim it was, because it could literally be dozens of people now. But there was somebody, maybe it was Michael Brown, who was unarmed, and on the news, probably on Fox News, on somewhere, they were saying, oh, it was somebody really big too. It wasn't Tucker Carlson. It was, maybe it was, maybe Sean Hannity. Somebody said, he was armed. He was armed because he was so big and scary. He was a big black man.
Right. He was armed with his race.
Right.
Basically, is what he was saying. Yes.
And other things you can't control, like your height.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I just want to... I want to say, too, that like, let's be real clear about this. That this kid's entire life was dictated by the color of his skin, and he didn't even have a chance to begin with because of the inherently racist society that we live in. One, he was born and suffered from lead poisoning, which doesn't happen to white people.
No, I mean,
it does, but like not in the way that it happens to people from this community.
Right.
Because privilege. Because the majority of white people can afford to live in housing and live in areas that are not afflicted with lead paint and lead poison.
Which, by the way, causes tremendous anger problems. And this kid was known to be fairly lovable and a jokester and sweet and a little bit on the slow side, I've been told. And I think, I just think he didn't have a chance from the very beginning.
Right.
And then in the hands of the people protecting him, it is not a minor injury to have your spine 80% severed. And there are different theories on how it happened, and it kind of doesn't matter. I mean, he was yelling that his wrists hurt, so then that means that he's not yelling something else hurts, I guess, at that one point. He's dragging his feet in a way that's strange, but then Stephanie Rawlings-Blake says she saw him in the video use his legs after that point, which I can't see, but apparently a lot of people can see that. But then after that, he's stopped again and put in these leg braces and asking for medical attention after that. So it's failure after failure, and we don't know exactly when it happened, but it's not because all the protocols were followed. He can't not be restrained. And
it's not something that just happened.
It doesn't just happen.
It doesn't just happen. Like, it was... Something big happened.
Something huge happened.
Well, and then, to further that thought too, so he has lead poisoning from a young age. He gets, he has run-ins with the law for small, what are, I guess, small possession charges.
Yeah.
Which, again, doesn't happen to white people.
Right, and exactly. And then it's like this horrible spiral effect, this domino thing.
It's like snowballing.
Because now you have 4 charges, even if they're all trace amounts of pot, or small amount with intention to sell. It's still fucking pot. It's still legal in a bunch of states. It's still, white people aren't arrested for it, even though they sell the same amount or more.
Yeah.
But then it becomes like violation of probation.
Right.
Like, what were you picked up for? And it's like violating the probation. Well, why were you on that probation? For violating a probation. Why are you on? I mean, it's
right.
It's never ending. They are in and out. It is cyclical. I have so many students or former students who are wrapped up in it somehow, and they're good kids. And it's a pipeline from being exponentially more likely to be suspended from kindergarten, first grade, second grade, to being kicked out of schools and expelled to the lowest rung schools, and then eventually dropping out and being hopeless. It's a pipeline straight to the prison system, which is, in our country, extremely profitable and ever more so on the backs of black and brown folks. Our prisons are filled disproportionately to any other developed nation, and it's with people who sold pot, which is legal in many states and many countries and safer than cigarettes or alcohol.
So he's born. He suffers from lead poisoning. He gets... he's a victim of the disproportionate... what's the word I'm looking for? Disproportionate enforcement of drug possession laws.
And drug criminalization, yeah.
Right? And then, and if you were in that situation, wouldn't you be afraid of the cops too?
I mean, already if you're black, you know to be afraid of the cops.
Right.
But yes,
So,
if you're white and you have all those things, you know, I'm already on probation. This is gonna be the last one. This is the last straw. They won't let me back in, whatever.
Right.
I'll never get hired. My family's gonna give up on me, whatever.
So I'm gonna do whatever it takes to avoid any type of interaction with the cops whatsoever, including if that means removing myself from the situation as quickly as possible.
Which, by the way, he was not alone and not the only person running. He was just the slowest.
Right. And as if that even matters.
Right.
Running from the cops does not mean that you should have your spinal cord severed. Like there's no justification for that whatsoever. Even if he was a hardcore drug dealer, which he was not, still no justification for the way that the police treated him. Even if he was the worst of the worst, which he was not, still no justification for the way that the cops handled the situation, and in general for the way that they interact with this community whatsoever. So it doesn't matter. So all of this is just like it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter. It's superfluous. It doesn't have any bearing on what happened in that vehicle during that time, and the way that the cops handle that situation, and then the way that the cops generally interact with that community to begin with.
Absolutely. I think to sort of move on from this story, I have two final things that I'd like to say, and then if there's anything else you'd like to say.
Sure.
I'd like to say that if this podcast episode reaches your ears or you see somebody talking about it, that you take a moment and try to exercise compassion for the people who are being called rioters and violent and looters and savages and criminals for being angry. I'd like you to try to withhold judgment and consider that there is nothing else for them to be. That's number one. Number two, maybe this is I was going to say maybe this is kind of Pollyanna-ish or like overly optimistic, but it's not, because I think it should have happened 20, 30, 40 years ago, and it could happen in any major city. But I have a small suggestion that I think could help to begin to heal this horrible divide. And that is that there are a lot of black police in Baltimore. We don't suffer from the problem of like Ferguson. It may still be disproportionate, but there are a lot of black police in Baltimore. And they are not only officers. They are also members of the community and of the black community. And they belong to the churches, and they have connections to the community, and they go to the barbershop, and some of them have a brother who's a clergyman. They are a part of these communities. They live there. And I think it's going to have to be on them. And not that it should be. I don't know. But I think all of these black officers who are part of the community need to reach out to those people, the barber and the preacher and the person who owns the local shop on the corner. And I can name who these people are, and I'm just not doing it, I don't know, out of like respect or whatever. But I know black officers who are related to shopkeepers and clergymen. And I know their names. I know those people. And they need to develop this is just my pie in the sky idea. I don't know. But I think they could develop a group that acts as an intermediary and helps to begin to heal this horrible divide. They are not so separate. The officers live in Baltimore City, and particularly the black officers, they care about this. They are also worried for their sons and daughters. So I think it might be on them to reach out, and I would love to see that happen as one tiny glimpse of something semi-okay that might be able to come of this horrible tragedy. Okay, so this has been awfully heavy. We try to end every episode or clip on a positive note with something we dig, and this episode we just didn't have it in us. I'm not ready to try to get happy and name something I dig, so this will be the one time I don't.
So that's it for this extra special episode or broadcast of The Dig. Thanks for listening. You can find our full episodes online at thedigpodcast.com. We're also available on iTunes and Stitcher and any other place you can find podcasts. You can write to us at writethedigpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at tweetthedig. And we're also on Facebook at thedigpodcast.com. Or just facebook.com/thedigpodcast. I think that's all we have to say.
It is.
This.
Thanks for listening. Please share, subscribe, like, rate, review. We need all of that. Thanks so much for listening.
Bye.